as far as material you're going to use in the tour, she took you on an absolutely stunning tour of the place. And she talked about all the keepers from, basically from 1890 to World War II. She gave you all that stuff. In fact, she gave you more than you could possibly use. As a docent, you're going to find you got 45 minutes, if that. And you have less than 45 minutes if people walk slow, or if they dilly-dally, or if they get stuck on the stairs in the tower. You might find that you got half an hour. And she gave you about an hour's worth of material. So you already got to cut half of what she does. So I don't think you need any more material. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of orient you to the period. Also, Deb said that she wanted to cover some areas outside that and before that because she's going to have you put some things in order and we need to talk about them for you to put them in order. So I thought what I'm going to do, I'm going to introduce you to the world of 1890 and the latter part of the 19th century, which is what leads up to the Lighthouse. And I'm going to show you some pictures of things that you may have only heard about otherwise. So this is Point Buchan, and I have this is just a bee in my bonnet, and I won't be offended if you do it the wrong way, because everybody does. I'm the only one who does it right. Everybody calls it Buchan. Why? It's Spanish. Yeah, it's like you're Frenchifying it. It's a Spanish word. It's like muchacho. You don't say muchacho. You don't buy an enchilada, which you have a list. I think it's, and if you want to anglicize it, that's fine. People, and it's perfectly okay to anglicize something. I call it Mexico City. I don't call it Mexico City. And so it's fine to anglicize it, but if you anglicize it, a CH is also a CH in English. We don't say, child, children. So anyway, it's not Buchan, it's Buchan. Buchan. Anyway, or Buchon if you want to say it in Spanish. Anyway, this is Point Buchan. Now, this is part of the 12th district of the Lighthouse Board. In 1890, it's the Lighthouse Board rather than the Lighthouse Service. And the board is divided into 19 districts. The board is about a half a dozen, maybe 8 guys, I didn't really count, in Washington, D.C. They are all naval officers with a couple of exceptions. They're either naval officers or they are Army Corps of Engineers, and a couple of them are scientists. Like you might have the director of the Smithsonian, you might have a famous geographer, you might have somebody like that. But if they're science in a discipline that would be related to lighthouses and navigation, that kind of thing. So it's quasi-military, it's military at the top, which is kind of nice because otherwise it would be they would be entirely political appointments. Lighthouse keepers are political appointments. You get appointed because you know people, and people think that you're in their party and you support them. But this military at the layer at the top insulates them a little. And the person who makes the appointments is called the collector of customs. And every port of entry has a collector of customs. It's a very, very important political job. Next to a cabinet member, next to the president's cabinet, that's the next highest level in government is collector of customs of the city of New York, or the port of New York. The reason for that is that's how the federal government makes pretty much all of its money. There is no income tax. What else does the federal government do? They do tariffs and duties. That's pretty much the whole federal government. Now, they don't have a big standing army. They don't spend a lot, but so these collectors of customs, they get to appoint people to be, this is a problem. It's called the spoil system. It causes problems in a lot of other government agencies because you get somebody's brother-in-law, instead of somebody that knows what they're doing, and then you got a guy that's pretty good and doing a great job and he gets canned the next time there's an election. Lighthouses are going to be protected from that a little by the military nature at the top, and they've gotten concessions on the concession system. So what happens is that when and it would be the collector of customs of San Francisco would be the person who would make the choice of who gets appointed here. But what he does is he nominates. He gets to nominate 3 or 4 people to the board, and they're going to pick one that they think is okay, and they could even turn it back, God, we really wish you wouldn't pick this guy. And they're going to respect that. This is not a very hostile time politically, so it is a political appointment, but it does give them a little bit of insulation. So these are we're the 12th district. All the state of California is 12th district. This is all the places, all the things that are under their charge. about the lighthouse inspector, and you think it's like the termite inspector or the building inspector. It's going to be some lowly level of government. No, he's the boss. The inspector for 12th district is the boss. That's going to change when it becomes civil service. In 1906, and I'll talk about that later, 1906 now, this board stands down and it becomes a fully civilian service. And then they're called the superintendent. So in Lucy's era, when she talks about the lighthouse inspector, I don't know who that guy is. I don't know how that guy's appointed or what the level is. But if it's 1890, the lighthouse inspector is the boss for the whole state. Okay, now this is the annual report from 1901. And I cut off the title, unfortunately. This is talking about Point Buchan. And so they make recommendations for where they think they need money. And one place they thought they needed a lighthouse was Point Buchan, for the reasons stated here. You know, it's a long way between Piedras Blancas and Port Harford, and they need to make a sharp left around in here, and they think Buchan would be a good place to make a lighthouse. They never got the money, and they never built one here. But if they had put one in, it would be right within sight of Stonehenge of the Pacific. You guys have seen Stonehenge of the Pacific, you know what I'm talking about. If you hike at Point Buchan, you know, you go to Montana de Oro State Park, and then you can walk actually about 7 miles inside of PG&E land on that side without a docent. You have to stay on the trail. You sign in with a docent, but you're on your own. You can spend all the time there you want. And one of the landmarks is right off of a point. There's a whole bunch of rocks that come up at sort of random shapes. It's quite beautiful, actually. They come up at random shapes, and it looks like Stonehenge with all these big monoliths sticking up out of the water. It's called Stonehenge of the Pacific. You'll see it in this picture. Let your imagination roam. Let's say they got funded. This is what it would look like. So that's Point Buchan. That's what's called Disney Point. You can hide a movie set like that. Well, first of all, for that particular movie set, they needed to get a permit from their light was so realistic and their lighthouse was so realistic. They had to file a notice to mariners that no, this isn't Piedras Blancas. There's an extra light here. You know, don't steer according to this. So they did, when they build a movie set on your property, you have a choice. But I think PG&E probably still owned it now, but there is no power plant yet. This is 1977. They'll either leave it, they'll build the whole set and they can leave it there and it's yours, or they can restore it to how it was. And you're unwise to leave it there because even though this is a beautiful lighthouse, it's probably not permanent construction and it's probably going to require more maintenance than it's worth, and you wouldn't live there anyway. But you can still find bits of the foundation out there if you go visit it. It's got a great view. So what else about Buchan? They also, so part of the 1901 report is they discuss every place that has a steam-powered whistle. And we have a steam-powered whistle. We're down there, number 7. No, we're not. Which one are we? We're 15. Yeah, so we have a 10-inch steam whistle. We actually have 2 10-inch steam whistles in duplicate. Note that that consumes 64 tons of coal in here. You wonder how the coal house is so big? They burn 64 tons a year, and it runs more hours than almost any of the others. And I guess that shows you, I never realized how foggy that place must be, but it's a busy port at that time. It's a very busy port. There's a lot of ships, and you have to keep the water hot all the time. It takes about 45 minutes to go from room temperature to boiling, and you can't have that. So they all have to be heated, moderately heated, not full up, and they aren't in steam all the time, but they have to be pretty hot. So they go through a lot of coal, but they do have other kinds of fuel too. It can cost about $2,000 a year in their dollars at that time to run a fog whistle. So the fog whistles are going out. They have a discussion of that in this issue, and they say, well, we're going to be going to compressed air. Everybody's going to be using compressed air. It's a lot more economical because you fire up the engine when you need the fog signal, and otherwise you're not doing anything. And nobody should be putting in any money in new ones. We shouldn't be designing any improvements, but we don't have enough money to replace them all now, but we will as soon as we can. So ours got replaced, I think, in 1950. And by the way, you'll see the video. I think you'll see the standard video that we show hikers, and it's got a sound effect of a whistle in it, and I think it's the wrong sound effect, and I think it's a picture of the wrong whistle. I think, just having looked at it online, I think it's a 3-inch whistle, and mostly it has to do with pitch. It sounds like a locomotive whistle. These don't sound like a locomotive whistle, they sound like this. So then there's another problem. If you've ever been on a boat, it goes out of a harbor, any kind of cruise boat, even a fishing boat, they're all legally required. I think if they're over 23 feet, they're legally required to have a horn. And they have steam engines, they have steam all the time, no problem. This is a real popular boat horn. This sounds just like a 10-inch horn on a pretty big boat. And they have signals. Now the fog horns have signals just like the light. There might be 2 beeps and silent and 2 beeps and silent, or 3 and 2 or something like that. Well, that can be confusing. If you're a boat out there in the fog and you can't see anything, you might hear 2 beeps, and that means I'm altering course to port. And so you're out there and you're blind and you hear 2 beeps, and you say, okay, somebody's altering course to port. He sounds like he's right in front of me. So he's going to be going to my right, so I want to alter course to port 2, so I give him 2 whistles and I go the other way, and then he comes back with 2 whistles again. And he can have you spinning around in a circle, or can run you aground, where you weren't going to run around before. And that's actually happened a couple of times where ships run aground because it thought it was being told to turn by a fog whistle. So that's another reason to be getting rid of them. Okay, these are just a couple of excerpts from the State Parks Docent Training course. Now, I'm not doing this kind of stuff with you because you're different. You actually are learning stuff. But the number 1 motto is you don't need to teach them anything. What you do is blow them away. Now, what that means is you can teach somebody to pass their driver's license. You're going to take a bunch of 16 years old, and they're going to learn, they want to drive. You're going to teach them, how fast you drive in the school zone, and which way do you turn your wheels when you park on a hill. You're going to learn it. It's not interesting, but if you don't learn it, you're not going to get a driver's license. Okay, that's teaching. You can make them learn stuff. Our people are not going to. You can't do that. If it's boring, they're not going to listen to it. And so what you have to do is kind of jar them a little. You have to wake them out of their slumber, and you want to provoke them a little. You want to shake them up. You want to actually rattle them. Even if you say something that isn't true, that's not bad, because they'll think, what? Actually, I don't believe that. I'm going to look that up. Bingo, that's what you wanted. And if they're talking to themselves about what you've been talking about, that's fine. If they're talking about where they're going to go for dinner that night, yeah, that's not good. Then you may have lost them. But You have to edit your tour for time, and I think what works best is everybody's got somebody in their bonnet. There's something that you like about the place, and I think you're gonna have to cut stuff out, so talk mostly about the stuff you like, because if you like it and you think it's really cool, you're gonna convey some of that, and that's gonna be more likely to be successful. We don't all need to do the same tours. I mean, I think there's a certain base, you need to know why there's a lighthouse, you know, and I think you need to know that there's a harbor, and you need to know that it's a welcome and not a warning. There's a few things that you need to know, but most things are gonna forget. The example that I do all the time, the natural order, and you know, it depends which group you get, you know, you divide when people come in. The normal order to me is you start in the horn house, because that's where all the signage is and all the pictures, and you talk about the foghorns, and you show them the bracket in the ceiling where the smokestack went through, and I always play the video, and I play the sounds of all the horns and all this kind of stuff. Talk about the foghorn, then the lens, then I go outside and show them the ports, then we go to the tower, and then clockwise on the ground floor, clockwise on the top floor. Second to last place is always Sunny's room. And when we get in Sunny's room, I always say, okay, we've been in the master bedroom. I say, now why, you may ask, why would the parents take the room that's cold, dark, and dingy, and why do they give the young boy the room that's bright and shiny and sunny and got the ocean room? And then I say, it has to do with that first room that we were in. And you get these blank looks. Does anybody know what that room was for? They were there a half an hour before. I played the whistles, I showed them the room, I went to the compressor, I did. Anybody remember what that room was for? There is about one, most of the time you get blank looks. They have no idea what the first room was for. And about 1 out of 20 will say the foghorn, you know. But so, if you're thinking of giving them a list of dates, the odds of that knowledge making it back to the bus is very, very slim. So you want to pick stuff that's cool and that they think is interesting, or it's lost. Okay, as far as dates, don't ever memorize dates, but you can memorize eras. And there are some dates that I know, I don't know you need all of them. I think everybody should know it was built in 1890, that's pretty easy. I would say the Second World War. I wouldn't say like tonight's topic was 1939 plus. I'd just say the Second World War. When did the Second World War start? Are you English? Are you Japanese? You know, are you Chinese? It starts in 35 in China. It starts in 39 in Poland. You know, it starts here in December of 41, but that's because we come into it really late. I just say the Second World War. Just before the Second World War, it gets, at the start of the Second World War, it gets assigned to the Coast Guard. The cinder block house is built right after the Second World War. You don't need to remember the year. If you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. You can't get that wrong. The only two times I talk about, because it's the only time we have time for, I talk about 1890, I talk about the original paint, the original construction, the wood, all that kind of stuff. 1890, that's a good year. 35 I always talk about because that's Lucy's room, and that's electricity. And one of my bugs, and one of my bees in my bonnet, I like to talk about life without electricity. Because I don't know if you ever had your power out. You know, my power where I live goes out, and since not very many people live where I do, it's a very low priority to repair. I've had my car be out for 5 days, and that also means I don't have water. Now I have a storage tank, so I can flush toilets by going and getting a bucket of water out of my storage tank and, you know, dump it in the top. But let me tell you, I appreciate electricity. It's like, hallelujah. Their whole life is without electricity. I mean, they never have, you know, electricity. So I think that's a good thing to talk about. Those are eras that I like. And then a big era here is the trains. This whole area exists because of the trains. The harbor exists because of the trains. The lighthouse exists because of the trains. And 1903 is kind of the beginning of the end of the harbor. Because that's when Southern Pacific, you can ride on a Southern Pacific all the way from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And as soon as that happened, the real big ships are going to start fading away because it's a lot faster. You know, train goes to Los Angeles at 70 miles an hour, and it's pretty easy to load stuff in a boxcar, and to put stuff on a boat, it's going to take 2 days, and you got to load it in the hold and put it in with winches, and it's real expensive to move stuff by ship. Okay, so if we're going to think of the era, don't think of California being big. So we become a state in 1850, and we are number 30th in population of the states. New York is one. We'll have 92,000 people in the entire state. The 1890s, so the Lighthouse is built. We're the 22nd state. We're down, I think, next to Mississippi or something like that. New York is still big. We grow pretty amazingly after World War II, and that continues, obviously. We're already up to 5 by 1940, but we are not a very big state. Everything's sparsely populated. Things are far apart, and we don't have a lot of money for infrastructure. So it's 1903. Harbor's going gangbusters. You want to take a ride to, you live in Chico, and you're going to go to San Luis Obispo. How are you going to get there? Let's say the train isn't quite connected yet, and we're gonna take a boat. We're gonna take the Pacific Coast steamer. Okay, this is a street scene in San Francisco. We're on our way to the ferry building, and all the piers are right alongside the ferry building. You know, there's all the numbered piers, and the ferry building is kind of at one end. So we're gonna be down on the end of this street. This is street traffic, and I don't run it for very long, so you want to look at a few things. You're going to see some motor vehicles. This is before the Model T. This is before Henry Ford. Lots of people are experimenting. Lots of guys who make bicycles have come up with a gasoline-powered vehicle. There's even a couple of companies that make them, but no two are alike. And they are really lightweight. You don't want to go up a steep hill on them. And there's three kinds of things that look like streetcars. There's cable cars, which you've heard about. You see a track, you see 3 tracks, you see 2 tracks, and then a groove running down the middle. That's the cable. In San Francisco, they will have, at some end of town, they will have massive, massive steam engines that are turning the cable constantly. It just runs constantly through the center of that groove. The driver of the cable car's got a handle and a gripper. And he has his gripper that goes down through that little groove, and when he wants to move, he tightens it, and the cable takes him along. And when a passenger comes and he wants to stop, he just lets go of it, and the cable keeps moving, and then the cable car stops. They also have streetcars. Streetcars are electric, and they'll have an overhead catcher. You may have seen those, or even some of those when I was a kid. That's connected to an electric wire, and those can go running. You'll see some that are pulled by horses. And if they're pulled by horses, it doesn't mean they're broken down. It just means there isn't any electricity or cable on the place that it's going. So, and then pay attention to what kind of vehicles are drawn by horses. And if you can come up with a characterization of what kind of cargoes and weights are drawn by horses versus drawn by motor vehicles. Oh, I have music too. The music is a thing called Cakewalk. This is in 1904. This music is composed in 1903. It's a more modern recording, obviously. It's done by a composer called Will Marion Cook, who he's been in France. He's lived in France. He studied under Dvorak. However, he's black. He wants to write classical music. Nobody in America is interested in listening to classical music written by a black man. But he can write ragtime. And so he writes ragtime. He does a pretty good job of it. That's the clock tower, that's the ferry building. It's the ferry building. There aren't bridges. There's neither a Golden Gate nor a Bay Bridge. You're going to come across on a ferry, but at the other end, you can get on a track and you can take a streetcar just like this all the way to Chico. And I'm told you can bang down the highway at 70 miles an hour on a train from Chico. And then you get on a ferry on the other side and you can come off here. The difference in weight is everything that's heavy duty, anything that's moving, anything important is going to be drawn by horses because they're more powerful and they have better traction and they can go anywhere. And in a town like this is about 350,000 people. You'll have about 1 horse for every 20 people, so there'll be 10 or 15,000 horses, which creates a pollution problem, to say the least. And, but not everybody has a horse. You start getting the more rural you become, the more horses there are. So if you get into farm country, there's going to be about 1 horse for every 3 people. But in a place like this, you can live in a high rise and not have a horse, not have access to one. There will be livery stables where you can rent a horse if you need to, just like you have car rentals now. Like in Oklahoma, Surrey with the French on top, he hires a Surrey. That's what he said. He didn't own the Surrey. Let's see what else. I think that's about all for that. Oh yeah, and this is the medical school, which they do have one then in San Francisco. So this is UC's medical school, and you can see that's a streetcar with the electric overhead, and it's going to go all the way down to the very building. That's how you get around. Now, before we have Port Harford, we have Malaz Landing. I don't know if you've been down there. It used to be a lot more, and it wasn't even maintained. I don't know. It's overgrown now, and people are afraid of it. I think that's the reason. It probably got trampled before. It's gotten really seedy. It didn't used to be seedy. When we moved here in the 70s, we used to go play with our dogs down there all the time because it was off the highway. But you can see there's a road down to the water line. Malaz has actually built a pier at one point, but he didn't build a very good pier, and it didn't last very long. If you're on a boat, since there is no pier and you can't land a big boat on the beach, you're going to unload stuff into skiffs, maybe a 20-foot skiff. You're going to row it ashore, and then there's winches and hoists here so that you can load it up here. And then if it needs to be secured overnight at the cave at the top, it's a big door, there's a big metal door on each end with a lock on it so they can store stuff there. And then he runs a stage line. So you get off your skiff here if you've come from elsewhere, and you can go into town on his stagecoach. He's a notorious.
I'm sorry, I missed. Where is this?
This is Pirates Cove.
Oh, Pirates Cove.
And that's the correct name is Malaz Landing. It's never had pirates at it, but it's.
Oh, I thought you said Moss Landing.
No, I'm sorry. Okay, that's me. I'm mumble. It's Malaz. It's called Malaz Landing. Malaz, he's an Irish sea captain who, he's kind of a crook and he's an alcoholic and he's kind of a wild character, and he's notorious for getting into fights with people and opening businesses that they go bankrupt. But he ran this for quite a while. And before Port Harford, this is really the only place that you can land stuff. Now, this is the 60s, and you'll notice that there is no road. There is no road out to the harbor. There wasn't. The Pacific Coast Railway ran a rail line. That's what goes out to the port. There's no road. You can't get there. You have to walk along the track if you wanted to walk there, but nobody walks there. You ride the train there. That's pretty much the only way you get there. They build the bridge, which they're beginning to do now. That's why their equipment out. They build the bridge, and then you can still see, if you go into the bridge there over Avila Creek, you can still find some of the pilings. They've got a couple of the old pilings by themselves. They're the pilings that were underneath the old rail line here. So that over there, you'll see the bridge over the creek, and you can see there's no road. There's just the railroad track by itself that goes across there. And there's all the horse traffic there. Those are there to watch. Teddy Roosevelt had the Great White Fleet, and he was trying to flex his muscles and show how tough America is, and he put a fleet with battleships and cruisers, and it's a big fleet. It's a really big fleet. And they sailed around the world, and they called it every harbor, pretty much every big harbor around the world, and it was a great touristy thing, but he's also showing how tough we are. And but then they stopped at several American ports on the way back. So this is when they pulled into our port. They stayed there for several days. That is Mari's Hotel, and I forgot to look up what year he built it, but it's right around this, just a little bit after the after the pier goes in. Mare puts his hotel there, so if you're gonna take a ship out the next morning, or if you've brought in your cargo and you wanna make sure it gets on the right ship, you can stay there overnight and watch it be loaded in the morning. Then in 1909 we get oil, the largest pipeline in the world at that time. The lay pipe from Bakersfield, from Taft near Bakersfield, all the way to Avila, and that's where we get into the oil business. It's Union Oil, and you want to know how you make a 200-mile long trench and how big the pipe is. Well, that's the pipe, and that's how you make a 200-mile long ditch in 1980. No ditch wishes. You know, those are guys with shovels. Okay, so I wish I had a yardstick. I forgot I was going to bring a yardstick because I've got a laser thing, but you can't see it on the screen. I'll just point. Okay, so our area. So this is San Simeon Ragged Point up here, and then this is Santa Barbara right here, and just south of Santa Barbara is a place called Elwood. So Elwood is where the Southern Pacific Rail ends, and until 1903, and then Ragged Point is where the Santa Lucia Mountains come to the Coast Range. So it's just cliffs from that point forward. So you've got the spine of the Santa Lucia Mountains and Los Padres National Forest going this way. This is San Luis, and so Cuesta Grade is here. And this is a really, really steep mountain range. It's tough to build rail over it. And down here, this is the California's Transverse Range. This goes all the way across the state. If you look at the San Gabriel Mountains from Los Angeles, this is what you're looking at, but part of it's gonna go all the way up to Point Conception. And when you drive along the coast of Santa Barbara, you're looking at those mountains behind you. That's all part of the Transverse Range. Transverse Range intersects the Coast Range right about there, and that gives us this big triangle of land that's really inaccessible except by sea, because it is just hellish to get over either one of these mountains. Now this is a very productive area, it's very good farmland. We got a lot of stuff to sell, but how are you gonna get it out? You know, you can't really get it out over wagon trains. So that's why the pier is so important. It's the only way you can get in or out of here. Now I'll say it's the only way. Well, almost the only way. There's about 4 roads that go through Cuesta Pass. There's a sequence. The earliest one is called the Trail of the Padres. So in Spanish times, you could ride your horse right up the bottom of the grade, you know, so you're driving up Cuesta Grade, and there's the ditch, and then there's the other hill on the other side with the railroad on it. Well, you go right straight up the bottom like you'd walk if there was nothing there at all. That's the Trail of the Padres. The only thing that's happened there is there's a big rock in your way, you know, somebody gets frustrated with it and kicks it out of the way. That's about as big a trail as it is. By 1876, the county decides it's going to do something that a county has never done before. They're actually going to improve a road. And so they get a bond for $20,000, and they hire Chinese crews to go up, and they made what is called the Old Stagecoach Road. And so this is kind of how it goes. And it's big road, 13 feet wide, dirt road, but it's at least clear of obstacles, and it's kind of smooth. And it kind of goes like this, up and down. And this is just a tiny section. It does that the whole way up, and it's pretty steep the whole way up. You can get on it on a car today. You can drive a lot of it if you're brave. And there's places where you can't go. You can walk, I think, the whole thing, and some people do. Now, some places it's been wiped out because the current freeway goes over it, but we can hike a lot of it. There's people who do that. You could find a way to do it. That shows about how curvy it is on ground. So let's say we're going to go to Santa Barbara when the Lighthouse is built. Well, there's a way. You know, you can take the Pacific Coast Railway, or a little internal. Oh, I didn't show you the coast. So while we can't get in or out of there, John Harford, same guy who built the pier, with the same Chinese crews that built the pier, he builds this slick little narrow gauge railway system down as far as Los Olivos and up to the pier, and it's got a lot of sidelines. Like at San Luis, it's got a little line that goes up to they'll put out better areas, that doesn't beat fields, you know, if there's some reason to put a rail line there, they'll put a rail line there. It's a small rail, but it does connect to the pier. It's all, the reason for all of this is the pier. So all of this stuff is gonna go to the pier. So you can take a train from Arroyo, or you can take a train from San Luis down to Los Olivos. But if we wanted to go to Santa Barbara, then they got rates. Okay, so you can go from, you can take the Pacific Coast Railway for to Los Olivos, $4.35. That's pretty reasonable, and that takes about a day. And then you got to stay overnight in Los Olivos, but there's a hotel there that allows that. Then at Los Alamos, you connect with the stage where you can either go to Longboat, which is 15 miles, or you can take the stage to Santa Barbara, which is 40 miles. It's an 18-passenger stage. Now, what does an 18-passenger stage weigh? I think of, you know, cowboy movies, they show 4 people. No, they can put 8 people, 18 people. This is how you seat 18 people on a stage. They don't have the fare. I think it's because it's a different company. They're just saying you can do it, but they're not committing the other guys to a price. And that's a 6-horse team. Now that's a steep hill. It's, you know, right now there's that 154. This is San Marcos Pass. So right now there's 154. So like a big bridge that kind of oversects it. You can still get on the old stagecoach road there, and it's a switchback, and it's like this and this and this, and it's steep. And those 6 horses, if they got 18 people, they're not going to be galloping. That's a slow slog up to the top. And then coming down is worse than going up to the top because, you know, these aren't exactly power brakes. I mean, the guy's got a lever that's going to put friction on the wheel, and that's how he's going to slow down. And you hope the horses don't spook or trip or something. Of these seats, you'd think that you'd be paralyzed to sit on top because this is steep. You know, you're looking over cliffs and it's bouncing around. It's a dirt road. It's not paved. You can hit rocks and stuff. You can hit potholes. That sort of thing. I'd be kind of scared to be up here, but that's not the least desirable seat because it's going to take what, hours? You know, you leave at 7 in the morning, you get at 4:30 in the afternoon. The least desirable seats are the center row. And the reason is these guys, they don't have seat belts, but at least they have backs. These people have a back. These people have a back. What they do here is they close the door and then they just pull a leather strap across between the 2 doors. And so you're sitting with no back support all day for that. And that's considered the least desirable seat. And there's dust down here. People actually would prefer to be up here, which kind of surprises me, but that's what they say. And I don't time myself very well. If I'm getting long, let me know and I can stop.
You're fine, Bill.
Okay, so how do you build, okay, so they do eventually, you know, how do you even build the railroad to Port Harford? Because there weren't beaches there. From Avila to Port Harford looks pretty much the same as it looks now looking from Port Harford out to the end of the point. You know, there's not like a road there and a flat beach. So they have to dig away those hillsides, and that's how you dig away those hillsides. Again, it was Chinese labor. And this is actually up in the Sierras, but it just shows how you would make a road and level out a hillside. This is actually Goleta. This is where they're taking the Southern Pacific in 1903 or around there. But it shows how you make a road in this area. And again, they do have motor vehicles. It's just they aren't very powerful or good, and they don't have great traction like a horse. The trains go in this way, and this is where they're making a road. And these are called Fresno scrapers behind these horses. It's like a big heavy plow, and it's got like a wedge that forces itself down. And so it's kind of like like those shovel things that you have in front of tractors, only it's behind and the horses are drawing it. So it's a Fresno scraper, and that's how you make streets, and it's how you make roads. And after you plow it up and you level it out straight, and then you compact it. And the way they usually compact it is put gravel on it and then just have horses go back and forth over it a bunch of times. Now in 1922, now the vehicles are starting to get a little better. Look at those tires. I mean, those are kind of serious. So 1922, they do a big improvement on, county does a big improvement on Cuesta Grade Road. It's still not a perfect road, but now it's sure better than it's been before. And then in 30A, they pave it, and it's on the same path it's on now, and it's actually a pretty decent road. I mean, it's been widened and it's more like a freeway now, but It's like a regular highway that you could drive on in 30 days, but it takes that long. Now, okay, just a couple of stories on boats. Two things about Lucy are things that I find memorable. One is how afraid she was of the train. Well, you saw there's no road. I mean, so she has to cross that track to get to school. Nobody's sure exactly where the school is. It's probably kind of where the guardhouse is in the back valley, but the trail comes down behind the Maury Hotel, which is where Fat Cats is. And there's no road there. You know, the track runs right along there. And you see a steam engine and it's shooting out steam. That's not steam, it's steam, that's condensation. That steam that's going in there is not the temperature of boiling water. Inside a boiler with pressure driving those pistons, it's gonna be really, really hot. It's gonna be a couple 100 degrees hotter than boiling water. And so it explodes, and then the pressure drives this piston forward, and then it comes back and the contents of the piston get dumped out, and then another explosion comes and it jumps forward. When that thing backs out, that's going to be shooting live steam straight out, and it's invisible. It only turns gray when it starts to condense. But one of those streams of live steam is going to boil the hide right off your bones. So you got to be real careful. She said she was terrified of being around locomotives, which I can certainly see. Then the other one, she said one day her father, well, this is a lumber loader. Now this one is called the CS there. It's in the Maritime Museum in San Francisco, and this is not the ones that were down here, but it's kind of the last one that exists. And the way that the last economically viable sailboats in California are these big lumber loaders that haul redwood logs from Mendocino County to other places and distribute them to sawmills. And redwood logs are very, very heavy, and coal costs a lot of money. And they're not perishable, there's no particular rush about delivering them, and you can get these into pretty small spaces. So these guys will come into a cove, I think they call them doghouse ports, because there's just enough room to turn around, barely enough room to turn around. They'll go into like some cove, and with winches, they'll lower the logs onto the deck, and they can open a hatch and just kind of slide them through, so they do go inside the hold. But they've got a technique for loading these things with logs, and then they deliver them. And there were two of them at the port, and they were the last two in California. And Lucy's father knew that they were going to go up to San Francisco to be scrapped. And so he took them down there, and he says, I want you guys to remember this, because you're never going to see this again. And she did remember it, and she writes about that in her book. So this is Queen of the Pacific, and you hear about its sad disaster. It was floated again. You can see, sometimes some people think that a porthole was left open and that's one reason it took on water. The portholes here, they just go into the hold, and there's only a couple. I was thinking of portholes on a cruise ship. No, there's only a couple, and they're just to ventilate the hold in a cargo compartment. The passengers, and they do as much passengers as cargo, they have kind of like staterooms along here. So it's kind of low in the water, but it would be kind of a cool way to travel. If you have a choice of doing this and or being on the 12-person stagecoach, I think I'd probably be inclined to do this quite late in history. I'm down to a couple things now that people may ask you about. They are topics. Hikers tend to get told this, the rest of you maybe not. The largest peacetime disaster that ever happened to the Navy was at Honda Point, which is almost within sight of here. I think it's just on the other side of Point Arguello. And you will hear various wives' tales and misstatements of what happens, but what actually happened is that, again, the U.S. is flexing its muscle. We just got the Panama Canal, and we're showing what a big Navy we have and how easy it would be to cover both coasts. And so they're doing a drill. There's a squadron of 12 destroyers. There's a Commodore in charge. Commodore is not a military rank exactly. It's a job. It's a temporary assignment. And so you got 12 ships. They all have a captain. If they're going together as a group and one guy is picked out to be the leader for that group, that's a Commodore. It's a temporary position. But so he's in the lead, and what they're doing is they want to go as fast as they possibly can from San Francisco to San Diego. And they're doing military stuff on the way, like they're doing firing exercises, and they're waking them up in the middle of the night with, with battle stations and all this kind of stuff. They're trying to be as tough and military as possible, and they want to make the best time they can to San Diego. And they get off Honda Point, and they have a major navigational error. What they're trying to do is thread the needle and go into the Santa Barbara Channel instead of going outside the Channel Islands, because it's a little shorter that way. So you go inside San Miguel Island and go right down the channel, and you could go really fast down there. The problem is it's just horrible, horrible weather, and you can't see anything. But they often do that. But the problem is the week before there's been a tsunami in Japan. And it was like had a 7.8 magnitude earthquake, and it really messed up the currents in the Pacific. It was a tsunami closer to Japan. Over here it wasn't a tsunami, but it changed the speed and direction of tides. The way that they're navigating is by dead reckoning. They know what their engine speed is. They know how many times the screws are turning. They know how far they've moved through the water. They also know what the temperature, what the speed of the current is. So if the current's going this way and you're going this speed this way, you subtract and all that. So they've got stuff like that. That's called dead reckoning. Navigator thinks he knows where he is based on that. But what they don't know is that the water is moving in a different direction than it usually would be moving. It's moving at a different speed than it usually would be. And then the other thing is they do have this brand new navigational aid on board. It's called radio. So they've got a system where you can tune into one station here, and you can tune into another station here, and you can move your antenna and get it to line up perfect, and you can triangulate, and you can calculate exactly where you are, and they do that. And so they got this discrepancy. The navigator says, look, I know I'm at the entrance to the Santa Barbara Channel, but I got this radio stuff, and it says I'm way the hell back here. And Captain, no, go with what you know. Go with your experience. Well, that's what happens. And the other thing is, if they couldn't see, what you'd normally do is they'd slow way down, and they would sound. They'd slow way down, and they'd be dropping lines with weights on them, and they'd be measuring how deep the water was. Oh, getting shallow. There's something happening here. But they're trying to show how fast they are, so they don't do that. They're turning at 20 knots, so they're going more than 20 miles an hour, which is pretty darn fast for a boat that's this big. I mean, they are really speeding, and it's kind of like a traffic pileup on a freeway. You know, one guy stops and the guy behind him can't stop, and so the first guy runs aground, and they knew that they were in trouble, so they sound all their warning sirens, and then the guy behind him hears all the warning sirens, and so they immediately, well, we're going to go hard port to not run into this guy. So they run hard port, and they run onto a different rock, and the guy in the middle doesn't hear anything at all, and he just barrels straight through them both at 20 miles an hour. And so they lost 7 out of 12, and they lost 23 men. Now, the thing that you will hear that's a wives' tale, and you hear this a lot, and it's good to know about wives' tales. They'll say that the Commodore got court-martialed for making a bad decision, and they're going to say that the guys who didn't run their boats aground got court-martialed for not following orders, because they were supposed to do what he said, which they would have. And that's just stupid. That isn't what happened. There is a court-martial. Everybody testifies because it's an inquest, and you would do that. Anytime you got a disaster, it's an inquest. And so they're going to say, okay, what happened? Everybody's going to testify. Yeah, there's a trial. It's a court-martial. I think he was relieved of command. The Commodore gets relieved of command. But it wasn't like they thought these guys that didn't run on the rocks were guilty, you know, although it was actually blind luck. If they would have been first in line, they would have hit him too. Okay, so like I say, this area is very productive. Only a couple times. Sometimes I ask people, this is the chart on the wall. It says what we sold, you know, what the harbor exported in '87, and, you know, 13 million pounds of barley, 18 million of wheat, 8 million of beans, you know, hogs. And I ask people sometimes, just generally looking at the vegetable crops, you know, cattle or something different, but we do wine grapes, strawberries, broccoli, avocados, or then it's wheat, barley, beans, and stuff like that. What's the big difference? And the huge technology difference. And the difference is that this stuff's all irrigated, and this stuff is all dry crop. They're planting this stuff in November, and they're harvesting it as soon as it gets warm enough to ripen, and they're not watering it because they don't have all the stuff we have now. And this is all irrigated, which is why the water tables then are like 30 feet down, and they're like 800 feet down now. And we're just about here. Let's see. Oh yeah, so that's us. So you're done.
That's marvelous.